Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Just kind of taking it a little slow for the summer and taking a break from the research type videos, but wanted to do a few things here, kind of informational videos. This one's going to be about equipment defect detectors on the railroads. There's been some talk of those in the general public since the big Norfolk Southern derailment in Ohio. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an informational thing about what they are and what they do. Talking railroad detectors or defect detectors. What are they? Well, basically they're wayside equipment that detects such things as dragging equipment, hot bearings, and wheel flat spots, to name a few. Now, all detectors are different. They all don't detect all of that stuff. They've been around for quite a long time, for decades now. And of course, they're getting more sophisticated, just like everything else is with electronic upgrades and things like that. Where are they? Well, they're basically on the main rail lines, and they're usually spaced about every 10 miles. Uh, can you hear them? Yeah, with the proper radio, you definitely can. Any radio scanner or police radio, as the general public usually calls them, the older and cheaper, the better. They're on regular railroad frequencies, but they're not as strong as the regular dispatch, which goes through towers and repeaters and stuff like that, so it can be heard over the entire line. It depends on terrain and locations, but usually 10 miles is attainable if you have a good radio and some form of antenna. I know I'm able to get several of them at my location, and I'm about 10 miles from all the detectors. And of course, it varies with weather and conditions like that, just like you have skip with CB and all that type of thing. What do they say? Well, again, it varies depending upon the railroad. Some of them simply keep it very simple and will just say no defects if they don't find it. They usually do give like a mile post. Some give a lot more information, like temperature, number of axles, and even speed of the train, like the not Norfolk Southern, but the Canadian National does. There's a video on the channel that covers a Canadian National, which is a good example of one that gives more information. So what does the train have to do with these things? Well, it's usually required to acknowledge, even if it gets a good report. They usually have to give the milepost number and just by radio acknowledge that they did receive the report. And depending upon the severity, usually critical or none, will determine what steps they have to take next. Of course, it varies by railroad and some have different procedures. The most typical thing would be they would stop and inspect or wait for the car department to assist if it's something that they really can't do, or if they have a really long train and it would take a long time to assess the condition. With two-man crews now, it makes it more difficult because they have to walk all the way to the rear of the train in some cases. Back when there were cabooses, it would have made it easier, as they could at least be met halfway by the crew from the rear. Sometimes set off the car at the closest siding might be the best option, or they may continue with a speed reduction until the next detector or terminal. And dispatch usually gets involved. If it's a more critical type of thing, dispatch will usually give them instructions on whether to set off the car, or they will get the car department en route. It all depends, so it kind of varies, but the whole idea is to be safe and keep from getting into a worse situation like a derailment or a crash or something of that nature. So what do these things look like? Here's a typical Norfolk Southern on a two-track main line. You see the sensors there, kind of those dark spots between the rails. Well, those are actually flaps. And if something were to drag, it would hit that flap and cause it to move down and then back upward, and that would trigger something dragging. Could be an air hose, it could be some loose equipment, it could be some strapping from certain types of cars. Off to the side of the rails, you see other sensors. Those are what checks for things like heat, so it can determine if there's a hot wheel bearing, a hot wheel, and even sends loud noise, which registers as an impact, and that's used for flat spots on wheels. And also you see over to the left the electronics and transmission house shelter. What they call a house is where the electronics and the antenna are set up to transmit so the train can hear it. Now that's just a short range transmission because it's only designed really for the train to hear it when it's near the detector and then respond to it. That's why it doesn't have as strong of a signal output as your regular over-the-road frequencies do. So here's a brief no defects message from a Norfolk Southern detector.
Norfolk Southern milepost 430.7. Main 2, no defects.
See, simple and to the point. Now here's the kind of message you don't want to hear.
430.7. Main 2, critical alarm. First, dragging equipment from axle 3, 5 to axle 4, 1. Critical alarm. Second, dragging equipment from...
So there you see how that gives a lot more detailed information. And it seems since the derailment in Ohio, these detectors have been allowed to talk more. Prior to that, at least on Norfolk Southern, they usually would just indicate a critical alarm, and then they would refer the train to call the help desk, which would give all of the detailed axle numbers and stuff like that, and further instructions. So we might be hearing these things talk a lot more now that the lawmakers are getting involved in train safety. It might even be mandated that the detectors will be spaced out even shorter distances, maybe at less than every 10 miles. So we'll just have to stay tuned on that. But let's listen to that one more time just to hear that detail that it gives.
430.7. Main 2, critical alarm. First, dragging equipment from axle 3, 5 to axle 4, 1. Critical alarm. Second, dragging equipment from...
And in this particular case, nothing bad happened. There was no derailment. In fact, I think it was a day in winter when we just had a heavy snow overnight, a heavy wet snow, and the trains had a lot of hanging ice from underneath, so they were more prone to set off these detectors. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video. Be sure to check out the other channel videos and like and subscribe, and keep watching because we still have much more planned. Thanks again.